It's an amazing moment for all of us as we get together to listen through and learn from our presenters this morning, this afternoon, this evening on engaging faith leaders in GBV, gender-based violence programming in humanitarian and emergency settings, more specifically on the best practices and the impact they have been able to witness. This webinar is hosted by the intersectionality pillar under the bigger regional GBV working group, East and Southern Africa. To get us moving, this webinar is translated live in 3 languages: Arabic, French, and Portuguese, and English. And we are requested that even if you are an English speaker, at the bottom of your screen, there's like a sign that looks like a globe. Kindly choose the language, the room, and you'll be able to hear the webinar in the language of your choice. We are requesting all of us to remain muted so that we minimize the interruptions. And we ask all of us to feel free to use the chat function to raise any issue and question, and kindly share your name, and against your name put M or F for male or female, then stroke the language that you are joining us in and where you're joining us from. And if you don't mind, what is your role in your organization? This will enable us to be able to know who is part of this. And lastly, write one expectation, something we are looking forward to from this webinar. Therefore, once more, welcome, karibuni sana. We'll have 3 presentations, and from the 3 presentations, we'll have a moment we can discuss and share experiences. And if you don't mind, allow me to welcome Karen Williams, who will be able to help us understand more on this webinar as we continue with our webinar this morning, this afternoon, and this evening. Karibuni sana. Karen, welcome.
Thank you so much, David, and welcome everybody. We are so happy to see everyone. I know some people will still be joining as we are starting at 12 or 2:30, but it's just a few minutes after. So we're going to try to keep on time as best as possible because we have a lot to get through today. So welcome everyone, especially from your co-chairs of the intersectionality pillar of the Regional East and Southern Africa GBV AOR working group. So that's myself and George Ode, who's here with us also. So thank you so much for joining. You may be aware that we had a similar webinar under the emerging practice around engaging faith leaders. And we had such a fantastic response that we wanted to expand the conversation and keep going. We had so many people who were interested, who had so many questions and experiences to share. So today we will have some other perspectives, including actually from a faith leader. So this is really exciting. We have a very exciting agenda today, and we're hoping that we a lot of participation from you colleagues, and also because we have interpretation today through Arabic, through French, and through Portuguese. We're hoping that the audience has even expanded more. So we're creating a greater access for all joining today. So just to let you know, through our program, we will have 3 speakers from different organizations, from Islamic Relief, from World Vision, and from Tear Fund. After this welcome and opening remarks, we'll move in for our speakers. They'll have presentations each, And then we have Pauline, our colleague, our intersectionality pillar member, who will summarize some of the key takeaways from those presentations. And then we have a nice chunk of time designated for questions and answers and feedback from the audience. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, or you have comments or thoughts, you can put them into the chat box, as we have a number of colleagues who will be looking at this and monitoring, and we can take them down. And we'll also hopefully have some time to maybe allow some audience members to ask questions as well later. So that will be our exciting webinar for today. And so thank you so much for joining. I'm seeing the members are increasing as we're going along, which is fantastic. And we have colleagues from all over East and Southern Africa and even beyond as well. So we're really excited to have you all here. Without further ado, I'm going to pass you to the intersectionality co-chair, George. And George will just explain a little bit more about why we're having the webinar and the objectives. Thank you. Over to you, George.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is George Odwe from Population Council, and currently co-chairing the intersectionality pillar of the regional GBV working group for Eastern and Southern Africa. So we are very much delighted to have you join us today in this emerging webinar practice, and we look forward to a very exciting and interesting presentation and discussion on this quintessential subject. So the title of this emerging practice webinar is Engaging Faith Leaders in GBV Programming in Humanitarian as well as Emergency Settings in the Eastern and Southern Africa. So we all recognize that faith leaders play a very important role, especially when it comes to prevention and responding to GBV. And so this particular webinar is organized by the intersection pillar, basically to bring together various organizations working with faith leaders to respond to GBV. And specifically, we look forward to learning how various organizations apply intersectionality in GBV programming, as well as learn about some of the impact they're creating. So we will we will discuss various aspects based on various coming from various organizations, simply to understand how they are engaging faith leaders, and including what kind of tools and resources, as well as strategies and approaches that they've used. Best for this webinar, we also look forward to learning, and especially in terms of how we can consolidate some of these opportunities to strengthen the engagement of faith leaders in GBV initiative, and also to share some of the resources and the strategy approaches at large. So I want to take this opportunity to welcome everyone and looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you, and I would like to hand it back to David.
Thank you so much, George and Karen, our co-chairs under the IS pillar. And one thing that George did not ask us to do is we are invited into this pillar, and looking forward to having a further discussion with you around the intersectionality in GBV prevention in our region. So to start us off is Islamic Relief, presented by Anish Jama. He is the Regional Development Coordinator, Islamic Relief Worldwide. Jama is covering East African region and is based in Nairobi. Jama has worked with various agencies in humanitarian sector for more than a decade now, responding to emergency, building resilience, and supporting right holders in realizing the SDGs with support from authorities and religious leaders, among other allied agencies. And without much further ado, allow me to invite Jama to speak to us and share with us what Islamic Relief is doing. Welcome Jama, karibu sana.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. As David put it, I'm working with Islamic Relief Worldwide, based in East Africa. And in my presentation, I will be very brief in regards to our interaction and engagement of faith leaders who recently, in most of our programming, whether it is emergency development, be it climate, be it conflict, they have proven themselves to be very core when it comes to engaging the community we work with. And the reason why I've chosen this small slide in the first showing that connection, the blue, the red, the green, shows more about how religious leaders are really very helping us to interconnect with the community. Next slide, please. As Islamic Relief organization, as a charity organization registered in UK, we work in many countries, but for my case, to be precise for this meeting and make it more relevant to you, we work in 5 East African region office because we have different regions, but I'll give you a brief overview of the region, the countries we work in East Africa. That's Kenya, South Sudan, Sudan, which is now experiencing conflict, Ethiopia, Somalia. These are the countries that, if you look at the map and what has been happening of late, they seem to be having similar geopolitical situation in terms of either drought, in terms of either floods for the case of Kenya, COVID, which happened 2021, 2022, and to a larger extent now conflict, which is really we're monitoring very closely happening in Sudan and in some parts of Ethiopia. And of course, Somalia has been very chronic in recent years. Next slide, please. As a faith-inspired agency, having worked in these countries, we have actually realized a lot more in terms of engaging stakeholders, because one of our entry point is to do a stakeholder mapping. And in that mapping, recently and over the years in our programming, as I said earlier, the religious leaders come very handy when it comes to reaching out to the right holders that we interact with. Our vision as an organization, inspired by Islamic faith and guided by our values, we envisage a caring world where communities are empowered, social obligations are fulfilled, and people respond as one to the suffering of others. I will be slow, David, because I know this interpretation. Kindly, even first, you can be able to stop me so that I can repeat what I've said for the interpreters. So basically, as a charity organization, we have a mandate. We don't work in isolation. We work with other like-minded agencies, other faith-based agencies, other INGOs, local partners, and to a larger extent, community leaders and faith-based and faith leaders in respective areas. Next, please. Giving you a brief overview of our engagement. I've sampled because of time to give you a flavor of our programming when it comes to gender-based violence. For Ethiopia, we are working in Somali region and also a place called Afar region, which are predominantly Muslims, a pastoralist. Of course, we have few in urban centers engaged in business, but we normally work a lot more with rural folks, people who are actually slightly away and hard to reach when it comes to providing services. So we have realized the result of our other programming that there were aspects in terms of when it comes to emergencies. We have the tendency that people will lose their household income. And once that happens, the young girls and single or female-headed households become very vulnerable because they have to, at the end of the day, to get something that can make them going during these emergencies, whether it's going to be drought, whether it's going to be flood, whether it's going to be conflict. And to a large extent in Ethiopia, we deal with a cross-section of this because at times you'll see the Somali region having a conflict with the Afar region. They're sharing some borders, and this has been a historical conflict. So this displacement will create an emergency for us to respond and provide services to the affected population. And we have seen that there's tendency of young girls, getting married quite early and out of their consent, basically because the family needs to provide an income, and they think by doing so they'll be able to at least get something that can make them going during that particular moment. And remember, they have lost their household assets as a result of the displacement. So other than providing other interventions like immediate responses, what they need to save life, and that's what we've been mandated for. But we also address issues to do with gender-based violence from that perspective. In the sense, it has proven that we worked with imams because, as I said, both areas are predominantly occupied by Muslims. And we have seen from our interaction with these imams that they have the power to influence. Because when you do your stakeholder mapping, one of the key issues to consider is what is the extent when it comes to power of influence. And using the religious script, they're able to provide this information to their believers. I normally call it from pulpit to the believers' connection, because whenever Imam stood up in a pulpit and gives a sermon linked to the rights of women in the Holy Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the target audience will pay great attention because they are subscribing to this faith. And remember, they have the patience to do the prayers 5 times in the mosque, except on Fridays when we also get women going to the mosque together with men, but in different spaces. So we normally target them during Fridays so that they can have a critical mass audience at one go. In Kenya, recently, because of the emerging issues of COVID, exposed number of issues in relation to also people living with HIV in Garissa. That's where we're working, and we'll be getting funds from UNAIDS for the last 3 years. So during the emergencies, when we're providing our interventions, be it multipurpose cash transfers, we've realized also quite often issues being reported by the government officials, particularly the county government, because we have a very good working relationship. We do direct implementation, and we say, hang on a moment, what else can we be able to do as an organization, being a faith-based inspired. So we worked also with the imams in Garissa, which is a very remote location far away from Nairobi. For those of you perhaps who happen to have gone there, you will know what I'm talking about. For those who haven't gone, by air is around 40 minutes, by road is around 5 hours. So we've discussed and brought the imams and the few Christian clergies in Garissa together. And it was really amazing in terms of exchange of the experience, having given them information regarding how to tackle the gender-based violence, both when it comes to what happened in what we have learned from COVID and now HIV. and they have been interacting with other institutions, including schools. So we have used the religious leaders as ambassadors of good hope to send the message in the holy text, be it the Bible or the Holy Quran, so that we can be able to reduce the impact of gender-based violence in a very rural setup, which will eventually perhaps could have caused other issues if not addressed through religious leaders. Sudan, predominantly they are Muslims, as I said, and currently they are faced with a lot of displacement. And we've had, of course, a number of gender-based violences happening in even areas that we don't work, because we seem to be working closely with the community leaders. But I think we also made an inroads in regards to having learned from these other countries, ensuring that we, in our programming, the faith leaders are essentially stakeholders in providing what we normally give them in our trainings. Milestones. So why are we doing this? And what will be the kind of impact that has been created, though small? There are some projects that have ended, and it has really shown, because we normally linking emergency also with the resilience. In Ethiopia, for instance, 89% of women participate in decision making, which to me is very critical in an area which is predominantly Muslims, and we know it's more masculine. So having women participate in the decision making process will somehow and to greater extent reduce the gender-based violences, especially among women and girls. In Bangladesh, 19 early marriages through adolescent clubs were actually handled, and the income of the women improved by 90%. And in this webinar, it's good to appreciate the fact that poverty has played a very critical role. And when we have emergencies, the effect is even triple. So as an organization, we said we have also to address the grassroots issues to build on our experience. Next slide, please. So what's so special about the religious leaders in terms of connectivity? Religious leaders, in summary, they have the access capital. What do I mean? They have the power of influence in the midst of any crisis.
Jama,
Yes, please.
we have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll move very fast. And they also have social capital and the spiritual capital. Combining this, they'll be able to at least do wonderful kind of impact when you work through them. In Ethiopia, I will not repeat so much about this. We have observed the trend has actually improved, and girls are able to go to school rather than them getting married quite early because of the emergencies of conflict and drought, leaving them very vulnerable. Next slide, please. Because of time, I will also give you a brief on the impact we have created in Mandera. We work with religious leaders to a larger extent because of conflict, which has displaced quite a number of people. And it was an interclan conflict, but having worked with them and for them providing guidance in the mosque, and we also invited them in FM stations, radio stations, spoken in local language, reaching out to the greater mass, because quite a number of people have mobile phones and they're able to listen to their radios tuned to their local FM. It was really wonderful in the sense that an area which had chronic interclan conflict but blown out of proportion during emergencies, they were able to sign a peace accord. And they said that they would like to speak to religious leaders, not the politicians, because they have seen the fruits of working with the religious leaders, and the community has really shown a lot of hope. And they were able to get the immediate result of signing a peace accord. And as we speak, that area has been peaceful for quite some time now, despite the emergencies that we have witnessed, be it floods or COVID or conflict. Next, please. A small photo here on the right-hand side, our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a role model for areas where we work. This is the example we use. And he clearly said the best among you are those who are best to their women. So this reinforces the message. Because they're believers and they go to the mosque, especially on Fridays, this message is taken home quite seriously. And we have seen quite a number of women who are now gaining momentum in terms of making decisions and also creating income for themselves. Next, please. Next, please, because of time, I hope. Yeah. So can we be effective? Yeah. When we look at emergency, somehow we'll also be looking at what follows after it. We are now in the sense of enhancing resilience, reducing vulnerability as a result of working with religious leaders, and mitigating the risk of gender-based violence in emergencies. Access to education, vocational training, and skill development can also promote sufficiency. That's after the emergency. I'll not dwell that so much on it because today's discussion is about emergency. Next, please. So the impact, the top key highlights for us. Working with religious leaders is an effective way of penetrating the community. That's something that I've already discussed. Religious leaders have access capital, social capital, and spiritual capital, thus sustaining the fire initiated by the partners. So there's aspect of helping us during exit strategy because they're able to sustain these discussions and summons on Fridays without being paid. Utilization of the community champions through religious leaders has helped us in reducing the stigma related to HIV, gender-based violence during emergencies. Mapping and deepening partnership with religious leaders in the fight against gender-based violence or harmful practices has been a very wonderful journey for us as an organization. Finally, religious leaders can inspire, lift, renew hope, and eventually revive devastated soul in the chambers of gender-based violence during emergency, just like taking dying fish back to the sea or river. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies if I've taken much of your time, and I stop at that because of time. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jama. Karen, please take over because David is currently out.
No problem. Thank you so much, George, and thank you so much, Jama, for the really insightful presentation from Islamic Relief's perspective. And just quickly to welcome all newcomers. I'm seeing the numbers of participants rising as we are going through this webinar. So welcome to everyone. So we just had Jama speaking from Islamic Relief. And as we mentioned in the beginning, we're going to go straight in with our next presentation. And there will be plenty of time at the end of the presentations for some question and answers. You can put your questions in the chat box, but also there's a Q&A function also where we can respond immediately to some questions you have. But if you would like to use the chat box, please do. Kind reminder again, if you need language interpretation, you click the More button at the bottom. It has the 3 dots. And you can pick the room that you need. So it's in French, Portuguese, and Arabic. And just to say, all of this webinar is recorded in each language. It will be uploaded to the GBV AOR YouTube channel. So you can access this entire webinar again, and the presentations, you'll see everything there. So just to let you know, so you can really engage and listen. So I want to introduce our next speaker for you. We have Dr. Daniel Muvenge joining us. Dr. Daniel is he's the Development Director for World Vision International East Africa. He's been serving with World Vision International as the Regional Director for Faith and Development. He's based in Nairobi in Kenya. and he's had over 30 years in international development, focusing in different on the African continent. So we're very excited to have Dr. Daniel joining us today. He's a very much passion for the church and leadership, and a firm believer in the strategic role the church plays in transforming communities and nations. So we're very much looking forward. Over to you, Dr. Daniel, and we will give you a 5-minute warning because you've 20 minutes, okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and a very special appreciation to what Jama has been able to share from Islamic Relief. And I would like to have this opportunity. I want to say thank you for the opportunity to give World Vision to be able to share some perspectives from our experience working with faith leaders, and especially in addressing gender-based violence. Just for those who are new to World Vision has been in existence for the last 71 years, covering, we have footprints in almost 100 countries. And here in Africa, we are in about 27 countries. In East and Southern African countries, we are in 18 countries. Most of the countries that have multi-faith are within the East African region. And I just want to share just some of the perspectives from World Vision. I want to cover this, and as I finish, I'll be inviting one of the faith leaders just to render our voice in terms of how we have been working with faith leaders to be able to address some of the issues in the community, including the gender-based violence. So I'll be sharing my space with her. Next slide, please. Good. I think even as we come to talk about faith and faith leaders and their role in addressing gender-based violence, we need to ask ourselves why it matters. And I want to say it matters because this gender-based violence is a global problem. And when we think in terms of 1 in every 3 women across the globe actually experience violence, it's a big issue that we need to be concerned about. And when you look at, for example, in the context of emergencies, you know, there's been dramatic rise in the instances of gender-based violence. And you can see the list is huge, whether it's child marriage, whether it's rape, whether it's trafficking, whether it's sexual assault or FGD, all these issues. And you can see migration, displacement, and the presence of armed actors and lack of access to services are some of the major drivers to this issue. So we are dealing with a global problem which requires the attention of all of us, including the faith actors. Next slide, please. And as I think I've hinted to that the factors that are driving gender-based violence, especially in emergency context, are many. They are huge, you know, ranging from negative cultural practices, whether also to conflicts and disasters, to even some of them are fueled by faith and faith convictions, some of the convictions that we see, to actually even the conflict within the community level and the family especially. All these factors are all working towards to be able to drive gender-based violence, especially in emergency context. Next slide, please. I just want to share a few years ago, 2 years ago, we commissioned a study in looking at, in 2 countries, looking at 1,665 respondents in 2 countries. And the report was shared last year. And just to help us to paint a picture of the situation. And as you can see from this sample in these 2 countries, almost 15% believe violence is a family matter. In other words, it's actually fair in the family, and it's happening every day. That 70% consider men as better leaders than women, and 11 say men are more intelligent than women, and 6% talk about acceptable to eat a woman under certain circumstances. And all this just one single research in one place, and that's telling us that we have a big problem and global problem. Next slide, please. And so the question that we are asking, and I'm happy Jama addressed a bit of this question, is why should we bring the faith leaders, the faith actors? Why are they critical? What is their contribution? And I think I would say in a nutshell is that the influence that churches and religious leaders, communities, they bring to addressing gender-based violence is actually crucial. Because it's crucial, it helps in changing the harmful attitudes, the practices and behaviors, and preventing gender-based violence. And we at World Vision are committed to actually investing in preventing and protecting children from all forms of violence. Because World Vision, as a Christian organization, child-focused and community empowering, we see this as an opportunity to empower faith communities to be able to address this problem. Next slide, please. One of the questions that we also need to reflect as we think about faith leaders and their role in ending GBV is actually asking the question, which faith leader are we talking about? Who is actually a faith leader? And I think in the context of World Vision, we work with a broad spectrum of faith leaders. From churches, although we are a Christian organization, we do not discriminate. We work with all faith leaders, and we look at faith leader as any religious or local leader person. That person could be a male or female who offers spiritual and moral guidance, and someone who can lead public worship. But also, these are leaders who have actually influence in their own community. So they could range from Christian to Islamic leader to other faiths, including the traditional leaders, because the traditional leaders are very key in shaping the belief system and the social norms of any community. And you can see even our range can even be even the teachers in schools, community volunteers, as well as even young people are critical. We view them also as faith leaders, as long as they're able to champion faith-based messages around that. Next, please. So coming back to our vision again, just to think about our faith models that we use a methodology that addresses the heart, addresses the mind, and addresses behavior. And we believe that we need to move the heart by inspired faith messages so that when the heart is transformed and impacted and moved, it begins to shape the mind and the mindsets. And then when that is done, you equip what we say the hand. And the hand here is basically the behavior. And we know that process of moving from the heart, shaping the mind, and even the behaviors of the hands leads to where we see faith leaders and parents and caregivers and community leaders, including men and women, including faith leaders, begin to gain new knowledge and attitudes and practices that actually leads to motivation to be able to work towards creating safe, loving, nurturing, and responsive relationship within the family and within the community. So that's a kind of a methodology that we use. Next. And in World Vision, we have four project models that we have developed and we have tested and we have found them to be high impact models. One, we call it Celebrating Families, and this one targets parents, caregivers, and faith leaders so that we can equip them to be able to create loving and safe environments together. Then we have Channels of Hope for Gender, which basically targets equipping faith leaders to be able to champion and advocate for gender equity, gender relations, and transformation. Then we have another one, we call it the Empowered Worldview. Again, this one seeks to empower community members to transform dependency, negative beliefs, values, mindset, and behaviors, and actually with a view of increasing their resilience and improving their livelihood at household level, because some of the conflicts are fueled around that issue. And we have another one, which is the most recent, we call it Becoming One, which actually promotes health marriages, because we think if we can target the family, the immediate family, that is able to have a ripple effect to the community. Next, please. Some of the interventions that we do in communities that we work in all different countries, targeting different faith actors and local leaders to address gender-based violence, they involve prevention and education, and I don't have to continue to give more details around that. We also focus on protection and support services, particularly in emergency contexts, so that we can be able to create safe spaces and counseling services to be able to support those that have gone through gender-based violence. We also advocate and we build coalitions with organizations like others. For example, we have a coalition with the All Africa Conference of Churches to be able to bring faith leaders together to speak with one voice around issues of gender-based violence. And we also invest in building capacity of faith leaders and faith actors and local champions who become gender champions within the communities. And actually, in some of the places, we set up committees around that. Next. So what is the impact? I want to share two stories, and then I'm going to invite a faith leader just to be able to share our perspective. Next, please. So one is a story from using the channels of hope for gender, and actually where we target faith leaders, and in the context of Somalia, Puntland working with the imams to be able to equip them with the skills. And you can see when they go through this training, look at what Sheikh Abdul actually are able to say, that during the training, we walk them through a process. And by the time they finish the 5-day training, the faith leader is able to say, what is it I'm going to do? They come up with an action plan. And when they develop that action plan, they go to set up what we call hope action teams either within their community or within their influence, so that they can be able to do that. And so we see that the World Vision Channels of Hope program is more than just training and education. It's a life transformation. And this is what we hear more and more faith leaders talk about it. Next, please. The next story I want to bring is from, this is from Ethiopia, where in the northern part of Ethiopia, where we were working on actually in one of the emergency relief. And actually how using one of the models celebrating families, how we actually empower leaders, parents, caregivers, government officers like Debela, who is a gender officer, and we train them and we equip them with the different models that we have so that they can be able to go back and begin to confront the issues. And for her, she has been able to set up what we call the clubs, the clubs within the communities, and actually addressing, because one of the problems they were facing there is actually the issue of early child marriage, and working and advocating, targeting governments and faith leaders and local leaders to be able to transform that practice. And what we have seen is actually more girls in school. We are seeing grades improving, and actually we are seeing more agencies coming together to begin to advocate together on issues of the girl child.
5 minutes left, Dr. Daniel.
Thank you. So I would like to welcome the faith leader to speak, but just to say in 2023 alone, we were able to reach more than 900,000 faith leaders across the continent, and all of them mobilized and equipped to be able to speak to some of the issues related to gender-based violence. I would like to welcome Reverend Judith to speak in the next 5 minutes and share our own experience and what change she's seen because of influencing and empowering communities. Over to you, Reverend Judy. If you can come on camera, if you can allow, that would be good.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, please.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel, for welcoming me, you and your team from World Vision as a faith leader to be engaged in this conversation about gender-based violence, programming, and humanitarian emergency. Thank you very much. My name is Judy Wangari Gwayani, born again Christian, a faith leader in my church, which is Presbyterian Church of East Africa. And I have been working with World Vision Kenya since 2012. And the first module that I was engaged in was Channels of Hope, COH, where I became a champion in two modules, that is gender, where we have addressed gender-based violence in Kenya in various places, and also child protection, where we learned more about making our environment being conducive to the well-being of our children. The other one that I was trained about is celebrating families and empowered worldview. All these trainings have created impact in my life, because when I became a champion, World Vision used me to actually to teach and to train others, or to facilitate other faith leaders on what we go through in gender-based violence. Like for me, for example, before I went to gender training, I didn't realize that I was abused in various ways. Economically, I was abused. Socially, I was abused. Spiritually, I was abused. Emotionally, that is psychologically, I was also abused. I think I don't have time to elaborate on this, but I believe you can understand what I mean when I'm abused in all those areas. When I became a champion in this training, when I became a trainer or a facilitator, I have a living testimony of a certain faith leader who, when we were finishing the training or the workshop, he came running up front to actually testify what impact has been created in his life. He said that he was a perpetrator to his own family. He could beat his children, he could beat his wife, believing that this was a culture norm that made him to be a man. But after going through the training, he testified that he has greatly changed, and he will never do that to his family again, because he could beat his wife, children, until the nose bled, until blood came from their ears and mouth. And also he created black eyes on his wife and his children. So he testified that this training has changed him in a very, very great way. And he committed himself that he will never repeat the same harmful practice, because he thought he was respecting his culture. In child protection, I also realized that our children suffer in 4 ways. They are neglected. Most families are able to look after their children, but they neglect them, having all the resources to cater for their children, but they don't cater for them. The other one was abuse. Children go through various abuses like sexual, physical, emotionally, socially, and economically. And out of these, children have suffered until these faith leaders comes to this training and they realize what they have caused to their children. And by the end of the day, they realize that children need to live in a very, very conducive environment. There is also this other area of exploitation where children are sent to go and do child labor, where they are being paid and they bring back money to the parents or to the guidance. There is also this other violence, all forms of violence, beating children, where they use the Bible to verify, we use the Bible to verify ourselves that we are beating our children because the Bible says. But after going through the child protection training or workshop, they come to realize that they have been harming their children. There is a subject I love called positive discipline and violent punishment, where we realize after going through the positive discipline in relation to the word of God, where people use a rod to beat children, we realize that a rod that has been explained from the Bible, it is a rod that was used by a shepherd, a rod that would bring back the flock back to where they are supposed to be. But here we use we interpret the word rod wrongly, And that's why we end up beating our children. But by the end of this subject, positive discipline and violent punishment, the community is able to understand that when we are giving positive discipline, we are training, we are guiding, we are teaching, and we are counseling our children, but we are not having them. There is also another one that is celebrating family.
Judy, sorry, can I stop there? I think you've given excellent examples and also as points of a faith leader into this conversation. Just want to say thank you very much. And over to you, Karen. And if there are questions to Judy and others, we'll be more than happy to respond to them because of the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel, and thank you so much, Reverend Judy, as well, for joining us and for your fantastic presentation and inputs. We very much welcome. So just to say, we'll just all questions and answers and feedback we will do after all of the presenters. So we have one more presenter to go, and then we will have time for questions. And so we may come back to both of you shortly. But thank you so much. Okay, colleagues. So I hope any newcomers that have joined, I hope you can see in the chat that feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat box, and we're monitoring them and taking note of them so we can pick up on them after all presenters. Again, interpretation is available. If you click the more option, it has the 3 dots along the bottom of the screen. It's available in French, Arabic, and Portuguese. And the webinar is being recorded in all languages and will be uploaded to the GBV AOR website after the webinar. So you can access then and you'll be able to see all of the presentations there. So next up we have Deborah McConnell. She's joining us from Tear Fund. She's based in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So salam nachu to Ethiopia. Deborah is a member of our intersectionality pillar, and she's worked in the humanitarian space for more than 10 years with various organizations with particular focuses on protection and GBV programming. She's very passionate about women and girls protection and empowerment. So she's currently coordinating actors to respond to GBV, specifically faith leaders with Tear Fund. So over to you, Deborah, and we will give you a 5-minute warning also so you can keep to time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. It's really an honor to be able to share Tear Fund's work relating to gender-based violence, in particular, how we have been able to engage faith leaders in GBV programming. Before I go through my presentation, I want to just give you what would be the topics that I'd be covering. So I'll start with a brief introduction of, with a brief background of Tear Fund, the organization, and then I'll move into discussing the rationale behind why we engage faith leaders in our GBV program, and also continue moving into maybe showcasing one of our approach or one of our model that we use to engage, we use to address GBV in collaboration with faith leaders, and finalize with impact and lesson learned. Next slide, please. Tear Fund is an international Christian relief and development organization based in UK. So it currently operates in 50 countries globally and 22 countries in Africa. Relating to our gender-based violence work, we are engaged in addressing the root causes of gender-based violence, harmful gender and social norms, as well as also implementing projects focused on mitigating risks of GBV, as well as going further and supporting survivors as well. To support us in that process, we have developed two models or tools. So the first approach that we have is what we refer as transforming masculinities. So this is an approach that is primarily focused in addressing the root cause of gender-based violence, in particular gender inequality and harmful social and gender norms. This is a community dialogue approach that we use to be able to prevent gender-based violence. So another approach that we have is what we refer as journey to healing, which is a peer-to-peer psychosocial support group model. So this is a tool that we use to provide psychosocial support to survivors of GBV, and it's a peer-to-peer support mechanism, and it would help survivors to be able, to overcome trauma, and be able to journey towards healing. So we have these two approaches, and we complement these two approaches with other interagency tools and resources to be able to provide comprehensive GBV service to emergency affected communities. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we're talking about the rationale, why do we engage phase leaders in our work? The reason that we engage phase leaders in our work is primarily that, as you know, and we believe that most of the world population, in particular the population of Africa, is in one way or another affiliated to a religious group or a faith belief. So that means there's an opportunity to reach more people through faith leaders. In addition to that, belief systems also influence and shape social norms, including, you know, gender norms. Oftentimes, as you know, faith leaders are predominantly male, and their interpretation of scripture would be, based on their context and comes from the background of being a male. Sometimes there will be scriptural interpretation that would reinforce patriarchal norms, that would enforce rigid gender norms, and going further as far as justifying violence and stigma against survivors. So it's very important to engage with faith leaders to shift their individual belief and attitude as well, so that before they can be able to reach other community members. So it's important to engage with them. And another rationale would be violence also happens in church and amongst faith communities as well. So we have, data on that. And it's not limited to other communities which are not affiliated with any religion group. It happens in church, it's happened in mosque, it happens within the faith community. So it's important to be able to address that as well. And also it's important to use as religious structures oftentimes exist pre-emergency, and then during emergency, and sometimes and also post-emergency. So it's important to be able to use existing structures, so to be able to ensure sustainability as well. So faith leaders can be powerful agents of change, by effecting change on two levels, which is individual behavioral change, as well as going towards the community and affecting social norms change. Next slide, please. Okay. I'll be introducing you to one of the approach that we use, to address GBV. And in this approach, Tirfan collaborates with phase leaders. So we refer this approach. This approach is called transforming masculinities. So I'm just gonna introduce you to the process that we follow in this approach. So the first, when we start working when we implement transforming masculinity approach, the first the starting point would be for us to engage with phase leaders. So we engage with phase leaders at different levels, starting from the at the national level, regional level, as well as at the district level. So we bring together these phase leaders and orient them on our GBV programming. So when we're talking about our GBV programming overall, it's not only transforming masculinity or journey to healing. It's a comprehensive program, so it would have different components as well. So we bring together phase leaders and we introduce them to our projects, and then also introduce them to the transforming masculinity approach. And further, they'll be trained on the transforming masculinity training manual, which covers different topics relating to GBV and gender dynamics, as well as topics relating to gender equality. So I'll share with you in a minute. So the topics that will be covered would be some of the topics that we'll be discussing under the community dialogue teams. So after phase leaders receive this training and orientation, what they would do is they would go back to their congregation and select, nominate gender champions from their congregation. So this the plan is for this gender champions again to be trained in the transforming masculinity approach, so they can be able to facilitate community dialogue. The after gender champions will be trained and they will facilitate a community dialogue. So the community dialogue is a 6-week program. The first 5 weeks would be a group of 8 to 10 females and a group of 8 to 10 males would attend separate sessions, separate community dialogue sessions, and on the 6th week they will come together, to envision a future free of gender-based violence. So finally, what the activity that is included under transforming masculinity is there are diffusion activities or community, what we refer as community-wide messaging activities. So these are activities that will be done by the phase leaders. So they will integrate GBV messaging through their existing structures. So to give you an example, the phase leaders would be able to share GBV messaging through their sermons or their Sunday services, and phase leaders would be able to also share GBV messaging through other structures like prayer groups, like youth groups, like children groups, different structures that are pre-existing within the church system. They would use that as an opportunity to share GBV messages. And also they will provide the messaging in coupling counseling as well. So that's one of the services that phase leaders program provide within their congregation. So they're not only limited with that, they also would reach the community which is outside of their congregation through different community mobilization and outreach activities, in particular using the the 16-day activism or the Women's Day and other independently planned events. So for specifically for the community dialogue, just to give you an idea of what the community dialogue teams are, I already mentioned that it's a 6-week program. So every week there would be a topic that would be covered. So the first week would be introduction in GBV root causes, and the second week would be gender roles and norms in daily life. And then they move on to power status and GBV, and then phase and GBV. And finally, moving forward and reflections. And the last session would be looking ahead, envisioning a community free of GBV. So the last section would be a group of male and a group of female women and men would get an opportunity to come together and discuss what they learned through the process and what they envision in the future for their community. Next slide, please. So after implementing this approach within the different programs we have in different countries, what are some of the impacts and, lesson learned? So the first thing is the empowerment of phase leaders and gender champions. So phase leaders and gender champions go through different trainings for phase leaders in the GBV and gender topics for gender champions. In addition to these thematic areas, they also receive training in facilitation skill as well. So this trainings empowers the phase leaders and gender champions, and they have been able to become a resource person in that community relating to GBV. Another impact that we've seen is shift in attitude and behavior of phase leaders. So change starts, within at the individual level, and there is there through the testimonies that we can see, there is a change in attitude and behavior amongst the phase leaders, and they've been able to review they have gained better understanding as far as GBV and gender, and further going as far as reviewing scriptures and some of the contradictions, as well as some of the biases. So there is a shift in attitude and behavior amongst phase leaders. And phase leaders have also become changes of agents and taking up on themselves to reach their congregation and further going and reaching the community as a whole. When we see the community level impact, there for us, most of the projects that we do sometimes are very short-term projects. For example, it could be a 1-year project. In that circumstance, we don't usually measure the outcome of the project. We usually report at output level, which means we report, a number of gender champions, phase leaders reached, number of gender champions trained, and number of communities reached through community dialogue. So this is what we report, but there are circumstances where we measured at outcome level for longer projects, like 2-year projects and similar to that. So in those projects, there is a change in behavior and social norms amongst the target community who were reached through the different community dialogue as well as the diffusion activities. In addition to that, also there's enhanced access to support for survivors through referral and social fund. Some congregations were able to set up a social fund that would support survivors in case of need to access, in particular, medical service. And for also, phase leaders are in areas where we work. Phase leaders are linked to the existing referral mechanism, so they're being able to refer survivors so they can be able to get support. And oftentimes survivors trust phase leaders, and they first primarily approach them. So phase leaders took that upon themselves to be able to refer them to different services.
5 minutes
next
left.
slide. All right, thank you so much. Next slide, please. Just to give you some, show you some of the figures we have. this is one of the projects we did conduct a baseline and inline assessment. It's a 2-year project. So in that particular project, we see that intimate partner violence has decreased from 69% to 29%. So this is according to the female respondents who indicated sort of a self-reporting, who indicated that they were affected by IPV. 69 indicated, but after 2 years of engaging through the project, they were able to indicate that it's decreased to 29%. When we see also male respondents at the baseline stage, they indicated that 68% indicated that they perpetrate intimate partner violence, which could be not only like physical violence, but it includes both. We measured both 3 components: physical violence, sexual violence, as well as emotional violence. So they 69 indicated that they do perpetrate IPV, and then that declined to 24% at the end line stage. Some of the gender dynamic and attitude and perception shifts that we observed, I just took some of the sample questions we had. I don't have all of the because of the time limitation we have. I didn't bring all of the the key questions that was asked through the assessment, but just a sample. So respondents who believe that men are superior to women were 90% at baseline stage, and in line it was 70%. And respondents who believe a wife should always be obedient to her husband were 81%, and at inline 61%. And respondents who believe wives' disobedience justifies violence is baseline was 53%, and line is 38%. So I think so from this we can see that there is a shift of attitude and perception as well as practice as well. Next slide, please. So these are some of the testimonies from faith leaders as well as gender champions and the community members, congregational members as well. So if I can read you just one of the testimonies. It says Central African culture does not talk about sex, sexuality, and gender-based violence, which have become weapons of war. However, our pastors' ability to speak of these things have been boosted at the workshop on masculinity organized by Tearfront this year. Our pastor is now denouncing those things. People are happy to see the president of the Association of Evangelical Church of Central Africa talking seriously about sexual violence against women, despite the risk he faces. As a congregational member. So from here, from this testimony, what we can see is that faith leaders are very influential in their position, and if when they take leadership, the congregation follows, and there are taboo areas which are not often discussed, like including sex and gender-based violence. So the faith leaders taking initiative to start speaking first engages the overall community more in the process of addressing gender-based violence. And the rest of the testimonies are more focused on how gender champions feel empowered to be able to start speaking up and being able to be agents of change because of the trainings they have received. And the other testimony is more focused on how they feel because of their engagement, how the faith leaders and the faith community feel ownership towards the projects, and how they are committed to ensure sustainability and continue this information dissemination as well as dialogues even after the closure of the project. So these are the testimonies from sample testimonies from the target community. Yeah, with that, I will wrap up my my presentation, and over to you, Karen.
Thank you very much. It's not Karen now, it's me. And thank you, Deborah, for taking us through this so well. And I believe all of us, we are reflecting, even at our own points, at our own spaces, how we resonate with the three presenters, how we resonate with the challenges that they are sharing with us. And we'll soon be getting to that moment of reflection, discussing together and asking ourselves, what is it for us? What tools can we adopt? What partnerships, collaborations can we get into? What policy engagements? What are these intersectionality issues in this space, and how we can be able to push this to the next level? But before we get there, allow me to invite Pauline to summarize for us in like 5 or so minutes what we are getting from these presentations before we get to a moment of a discussion, and welcome all of us into this space.
Thank you very much, David. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, very insightful presentation. Some of the issues that I picked from these three presentations is that faith leaders are powerful agents of change and are very good gender champions in ending GBV. And that faith leaders have to navigate intersectionality, which touches on social identities, race, gender, class, religion. We see that you've mentioned about partnerships. Once faith leaders are empowered, then they find that they have to accommodate people of different faiths as well. Therefore, we see them needing to have partnerships. Yeah, and we also see that faith leaders need to be empowered first at an individual level. They have to be engaged, and we see that organizations working with them have models, they have approaches, and they have tools to empower faith leaders. Some of the crucial things that come through these tools is that it aids faith leaders to avoid misinterpretation of the word of the faith doctrine, to avoid further oppressing the congregants, especially women. Norms. Sometimes the line between religious norm and social and cultural norms is very thin. And I think it's interesting. It would be interesting to actually understand how that shift happens, where faith leader has to speak contrary to what they have been teaching, and things that have been believed to be religious text. But these empowerment processes are working. Faith leaders, we have been told, command a dedicated following. That's why they are powerful agents of change. And interesting there, from Islamic organization, they have social capital, access capital, and spiritual capital. I think that really summarizes the capacity and the potential of faith leaders. And also this empowerment enables them to speak on difficult topics such as FGM, early marriage, which are drivers of GBV. Yes, so also we saw that faith leaders are there pre and post emergencies, and therefore they are agents of sustainability as well. And therefore they are core in engagement if we intend to have sustainability ingrained in our programming. We saw that awareness creation is critical to the community, and also community education, so that the alignment enables the faith leaders and the community to have impact in addressing GBV. We saw good examples there where radio was being used and to spread good messages, and the community actually preferred faith leaders' intervention. Some of the issues that are coming up because many times faith leaders seem to be men, and we know that many religions come from a perspective of patriarchy. How do we ensure that the gendered feedback is received and fed into the programs? Also, we saw that this process also ensures that we have holistic support services so that survivors have access to support to address physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and economic needs to empower the survivors. Offering of counseling is critical. And ultimately, we have seen there was a lot of empowerment coming out and urgency of the survivors from these projects, which then means they are focusing also on empowering survivors by promoting their agency and decision-making, providing opportunities for them to share experiences, which we have had their testimonies to develop and implement these interventions. Those are some of the things that came through. Yes. In summary, those are issues that I picked up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pauline. If you are my student, then you know which mark I would have given you. You'll have a very good mark for such a well done job. The percentages that we have is 60% of Africans ascribe to the Christian faith, and 30% of the same Africans ascribe to the Muslim faith. So we are talking of 90% of the population ascribing either to the Muslim or Christian faith. And from what we have heard, that is true. And we need to embrace that and take that opportunity and see what intersectionalities are there and how we need to get this out and to help each other to understand better the things that are coming our way. So there's something that Pauline has mentioned, engaging the faith leaders and them changing from themselves first before they purport to change the society they are living for. And so allow me to welcome one of us, Reverend Waweru. Reverend Waweru is recording in progress. Just a minute. Allow me to invite Reverend Waweru. Reverend Waweru is a minister with PCA Church, Thogoto, and she's a faith leader working with World Vision, a facilitator and a trainer since 2012, and she has engaged with the COH, gender, and child protection, among other issues. So, Reverend, you have 5 minutes to just share with us your transformation journey and where you see yourself in this space. Karibu sana, Reverend.
David, just to say that
Yeah.
Reverend, she had shared when I finished, unless there are specific questions or additional time you'd like to give her.
No, no problem. I was not there. Pardon me. I wasn't there at there. So allow me now to go back to our discussion. Thank you, Dr. for highlighting that. Now it's time to discuss. It's time to ask the questions that we have been having in this space. Specific questions that you may have for specific presenters or general questions. And if you want to shout your question, you can show by raising your hand, so that you can be able to give you an opportunity to discuss and to share some of the things that you are getting from this discussion. I don't know whether there are some, let me see here. Somebody's asking whether we can get the PowerPoint presentation. Yes, of course. And this is actually on our YouTube channel, and Karen had shared with us the link to it. Feel free to click on it, and you'll be able to get all this, and we'll be sharing the presentations soon after the meeting or after the webinar. There's a question I picked from Shaima asking the effects, and I don't know whether that's not just according to Shaima, the effects of engaging faith leaders in reducing violence against women and girls, and how that speaks into the programming space in your context as the presenters. And so I'll ask Jama to start. Jama, have you seen, and what is the impact according to you of engaging faith leaders in the reduction and prevention response to gender-based violence from Islamic point of view, Islamic relief point of view? Then I'll ask Dr. Daniel Muvenki and Deborah to quickly respond to that as I get other questions to ask. Jama, are you there? Dr. Muvenki, you can go next if Jama is not able to speak now.
Now, if I get the question is about impact, I think I would like to point to maybe one or two areas. One is that we are seeing increasingly, even the faith leaders are actually beginning to become more relevant in communities, because for a long time, some of them just stay on the spiritual, but we are seeing more and more faith leaders, because of the different empowerment approaches, they are beginning to become part and parcel and contributing to the improvement of the well-being of the whole community, more than just the spiritual. But I think the second area is the voice of the church and the voice of the faith leader, including the other faiths as well, that it's beginning to become more clear, more strongly heard, and they are messaging to communities because of the respect and the social capital they are. We see more and more communities believing them, and actually changes taking place. We see more girls going to school. We see more better families, relationship in the marriages improving. And I'll just give an example, one in Rwanda, where we brought out one of the models, the celebrating families. And we saw families, couples that had not legally married, actually 1,400 come together and actually, officiate, a kind of a mass wedding and coming together and actually join together and beginning a journey of transformation from marriage to their children, to their churches, to their communities as well. So there's so much that we can say about the impact that we are seeing as a result of the involvement of faith leaders.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And that's really very deep and profound. Deborah, anything?
Okay, yes. Yeah, as mentioned earlier, obviously the rationale that we engage faith leaders is because they are existing structures within a community, and they have influence and great reach because of the community's affiliation with particular religious or belief system. So I think the faith leaders are important key resources that we can tap on to be able to engage more wider community because of their reach. So that's the key aspect. As far as the impact and the effect we seen with regards to engaging faith leaders, we seen first of all, we seen individual change and shifts in attitude and perception relating to gender dynamics and GBV. So there is a shift in that regards at individual level. Faith leaders themselves, shifting their attitude and their belief, and in addition to that, impacting their the community, in particular the congregation or the faith community within their congregation. So there is through their teaching, through sermons, as well as Bible studies, user groups, and different groups. They've been able to reach a large number of communities, and there's they also engage with the community through their counseling program and similar structures. So there is a shift. There is a better relationship. Report a better relationship amongst families, amongst husband and wife through the counseling that the faith leaders provide. There is also change as far as relating intimate partner violence, as well as child marriage, and similar GBV aspect within the congregation, within the church. So the faith leaders are great influence, and they would support in reaching a large number of group of people. So it's an opportunity to tap on and to use them as a resource. And as far as integration with other with GBV programming, working with phase leaders is one of the components that we use. So it's not the only way that we address GBV. So in addition to phase leaders, we engage with other stakeholders as well as community-based structures on the ground, as well as government structures, and also work with other humanitarian organizations as well. So this is one component of programming that can be integrated in GBV response, and support other components we usually implement in GBV programming. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Jama, you are able to respond to the same question? Hope you're still around. Yeah, Jama, you're there. You want to give some feedback to this? And as Jama prepares to do this, we have two more questions for all of you, and especially for Deborah. On the question of, do you have specific tools for evaluation? Specific tools for evaluation. And how do you sustain these changes according to your programming space and practices? So I'll ask you, Deborah, to go first on that. And then if Dr. Daniel, you wish to add something, you can feel free to do so.
Yes, thank you. So as far as sustainability, engaging phase leaders is one of the ways that we can ensure sustainability. As discussed earlier, phase leaders do exist within the target community before emergency and during emergency and after emergency. So empowering phase leaders and working with them, they can be a resource person to anything relating to GBV. So I think that's one of the key aspects. So working with faith leaders by itself would contribute towards sustainability of project. So for us, with some of the experiences that we've seen, once once a particular project phases out from not in all of the location, but in some of the locations that we've seen, once the project phases out, in times, phase leaders continue to engage in information dissemination as well as community outreach, in particular within their congregation. They continue integrating the concept of GBV and gender concept within their existing structure, through their sermon, through the different channels, through different groups that they reach. So that's that's what we have seen as far as experience, as far as how they maintain sustainability. So the main thing is making sure the faith leaders are empowered enough, and also making sure that they are envisioned and they they understand that they don't need external support to be able to address GBV within their community, and making sure that they are envisioned towards bringing change. So just engaging with faith leaders is one of the key, the key thing that we use towards ensuring sustainability. Yeah, thank you so much. Is there another question, or did I address this? Sorry.
Let's hear from then I'll come back to you. Dr. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the feedback. Dr. Muvengi, do you have very specific evaluation tools?
Yes,
based on ensuring
I want to
sustainability?
make a quick comment because I need to sign off. First to say that for our vision, gender is one of the cross-cutting themes. And so we built it into all our programming process, from assessment, baselines to evaluation. So we have a tool that covers all the aspects, including gender issues, but we have also specific gender tool actually for assessing organizational, in terms of where the organization is around issues of gender. In terms of sustainability, I think in addition to what Deborah said, also because we build coalitions and work with governments and other institutions on the ground, and that really enhances even sustainability of the activities as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and before you go, because you said you'll be signing off, where do you see the future of faith leaders? Given the context, like in Kenya, we are in of Gen Z revolution. Where do you see faith leaders? And where's the
think
space for
when
the
you
young people and the young people in this space? Thank you.
I think when you scan the global landscape, especially from humanitarian and even donor community, there's a growing affirmation that faith leaders are critical to the transformation of society. So when I look at the future, I'm seeing more faith leaders that are going to get more involved in issues that are affecting society, including the GBV or even the empowerment, including the youth. But for that to happen, I think NGOs, like the ones that are here, we need to be more intentional, to invest resources, to strengthen the capacity of faith leaders, because they are right close to where action is needed. Just in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll ask Reverend to continue from there. Reverend Waweru, where do you see the future of faith leaders as a faith leader yourself? And how do we bring in the young people into this space so that we can have that transition and support the work that we are doing across the generations? Hope, Reverend, you're still around.
Hello, can you?
Yes, continue, Judith.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me another opportunity to actually talk about the future of the faith leaders. And I believe me as a faith leader, the way I was trained and I became passionate with this module, if we could have faith leaders who could take these modules passionately, I believe even in our young generation, we shall be able to teach them about respecting the families and also engaging families, men, women, and children in our resources that we have as families. And also, if we use this approach, it shall replicate in every part of our country and also the globe. And we shall see a great change where our children are living in a conducive environment, where the well-being of our children are catered for. So I believe if these modules could be taken seriously and passionately, and I have seen that happening, although it cannot be 100%, but the percentage that has taken it seriously are great. And I believe it will work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend. That's amazing. That's amazing. It will work, definitely. Allow me to ask the French interpreter to ask for us a question that is in French. This is the beauty of having inclusiveness in our webinar. There's a question in French. I wish to ask the French interpreter to ask that question for us. Sure. Yes, we need the ambassador. Yeah.
David, I'm happy to jump in because I think I can use my very poor French from school. And also, I think it talks to some of the other questions that I've seen in the chat box and the Q&A. So the question around meeting any pushback or resistance from religious and faith leaders around GBV work, messaging, and maybe even when it comes to those traditional values and the messages of the Bible, and if they, if they're maybe feel that they're not aligning with what they're hearing them with GBV messages. So we're talking about, obviously looking at GBV and what are the root causes, and we're looking at that patriarchal society and the power imbalance. So our question to the presenters is around, has there been any pushback from engaging with the religious or faith leaders on work at GBV? And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what that was, and then how you came over this, or you worked together with a way forward.
Thank you, Deborah. I think you're the only one now here with Jama. Thank you, Karen. Your broken French is so nice. It's so nice. It's better than any of us.
Merci.
Yeah, Deborah, go first.
Thank you so much. Yeah, as far as receiving pushback from faith leaders in addressing GBV and engaging in conversation, the way we approach it is when we organize workshops or starting workshops as well as trainings. We're not trying to tell them specifically this part of the Bible is your interpretation is wrong and this part is correct. We're not indicating that. So the process would be getting together and reflecting on some of the the scripture, and seeing if there are contradictions in different part of the in different part of the Bible or the Quran. So we would have a a guiding notes, including like Bible study guidelines, as well as a training manual as well. Includes component of the scriptural areas that we need to focus for this particular subject. But when we bring this, we're not saying this is correct, this is incorrect. It's more of creating an opportunity for themselves to reflect on it, to discuss on it. We would give them an idea of what the theoretical background as far as gender, as far as GBV, but as far as the scripture, just availing an opportunity for them to reflect on it. So there are circumstances where they would be convinced, and there would be shift of belief or attitude or thinking, but there is also areas where there will be resistance, and they there are areas where they would not fully accept all of the ideas raised. They would accept some of them. They would they would accept some, agree with some of them, and they would disagree with some of them. So it's an opportunity for reflection, and we don't expect them to change their attitude and mind all the time. So that's how we engage with them. So the pushback is more of a discussion. Most of the time they are willing to engage in the program, they are willing to be trained, they are willing to be to engage through the community dialogue sessions and things similar to that. But there would be some of the components that they might not agree, or there's some areas that they would agree. And we accept that. So there's from our point of view, from our side, if they disagree in a particular area, hopefully we try to see change in the future, but we don't push towards immediate change. We don't push towards immediate change. So yeah, that's how we work with them. And as far as power imbalance and patriarchy, yeah, so we need to start from them. We need to start from leaders. If we want to bring change, we need to start from leaders. We need to engage men as well as women in the process. If we don't engage men as well as if we don't engage community leaders, faith leaders, because they are so much influential, it would be very difficult to bring change, because some of the rules and the norms are primarily set by those groups. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Deborah. And you remind me of a quote that good habits are as hard to break as bad habits. So if we can be able to develop good habits, it will be hard to break them, just like it's hard to break bad habits. Allow me to start bringing this to a close. It's been 2 hours of a lot of learning. I know there's a lot that is going through our minds. I know there's a lot of new ideas that are coming up in terms of how best do we do this, and thinking through the intersectionality in this space and how we can be able to tap into that space of intersectionality in addressing our GBV programming in our different contexts. Allow me at this point, therefore, to welcome Karen and George, respectively, to help us bring this to a close and give us the way forward and what we are looking at into the future. Karibu sana, Karen, and then George.
Thank you so much, David, and a huge thank you to our 3 presenters. I think 2 have left, but Jama, Dr. David, and Deborah, and of course Reverend Judith as well. It was really, really great to have different perspectives. And as you know, the intersectionality pillar, this is for East and Southern Africa, so covering huge area, many countries of great size and population. So it's really hard to, there's no one size fits all approach when it comes to this work. We're dealing with different countries, different religions, and so it's a difficult one. We can't just give one clear way forward. So it's always very important to hear the perspectives of multiple actors and what we're doing. And I think it's very encouraging and hopeful to know that some of this work that's being done and to learn more about the approaches. And even the fact that we had, I think, a female reverend as well is quite interesting, because in our last webinar, we did mention about how usually faith leaders are male. So even this piece is very exciting. So I think we definitely saw a lot of questions. So there's still work to do. And I mean, as part of the GBV AOR, we're thinking of practical ways that we can support organizations in their work and in their approaches around this. So this conversation is not just ending today at 2:30. It will continue. And as part of the work of the intersectionality pillar, it will continue. So, I mean, we're very open to hearing any more ideas or thoughts you have. If you are based in East and Southern Africa, also, you can join the intersectionality pillar, become a member. You're very welcome to do that. I think as well, one thing that really struck me just before I hand over to George, when we speak about GBV, we speak about power imbalance, as that's a root cause of GBV. But when we're working with religious and faith leaders, we need to, I think what's really important is working together throughout any programs or approach, and involving the faith leaders, even in the development of some of these messages, to understand, obviously, we cannot negotiate on some messages around GBV. We have to be very strong and clear. on some messages, because GBV is life-threatening, as we know. So, but how do we really work with the communities and with the faith leaders to ensure that, you know, the NGOs we're working with, or the UN that we're working with, or any of these organizations we are with, that we ourselves are challenging our own power imbalance with those leaders and bringing them on board throughout, and really engaging from even that level, from the development of messages, awareness raising, trainings. I think it's really important, and to always be questioning both our own biases and any community or faith leaders' biases around the work of GBV is very important. So I'll pass over to my co-chair, George. Thank you so much for your attendance and your participation today. We really appreciate it. Over to you, George.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen. And I want to join in thanking everyone for joining this particular learning series webinar. As you mentioned, we are doing this for a particular purpose, and as already been mentioned, and as you can see, there are a lot of things happening, and various organizations have developed and worked closely with faith leaders, and we do have quite a number of tools. And during the presentation, I could see a number of organizations posting the kind of work that they've been able to do in various places. And so through this, we hope that we can consolidate some of these learnings together, as well as combine or come up with these resources to be able to disseminate to members so that we can carry out this work effectively. And so our next step will basically to look at some of the presentations here, look at some of the tools that have been shared, and be able to consolidate this. And as an intersectionality pillar, what we normally do is when we find a gap, for example, we're able, for example, to develop or summarize some of this and share with our partners. As already been mentioned, this particular webinar has been recorded, and we'll be posting it on the YouTube through the GBV website, and it's already been shared on the link there. So please feel free to go back and just look at some of these discussions. So I want to take this opportunity once again to thank everyone, and we would like to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Pauline, our discussant. Thank you, all of us, for joining this afternoon, this evening. And we wish you well. Looking forward to our next engagement. We'll be communicating in due course. Once more, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll switch on my camera.
Yes, George.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
Yeah, for George, and I'm very happy to be in this particular meeting. Though it was my first time to attend. Yeah. I'm a newcomer here, but I'd like to introduce myself. Yeah, I'm a coordinator at FJU, that is a organization in itself. It's a group of youth that works, that deals with, and is speaking here about the GBV. That's one of the area of work in helping youth come this, helping those who are facing violence and some are addicted. So things are not too much deep. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm happy to be here with you at the meeting as well, to attend the meeting as well. And maybe one request is I request to be added in the WhatsApp group and know who is responsible, so that.
Thank you, Walter. And thank you for introducing yourself. It's really nice feel free to reach out from the email that you received for the invitation so that we can get more feedback to your side, and looking forward to further engagement with you. Once more, thank you so much. Thank you for creating time for us. And I hope you have learned a lot, and more is yet to come as we look forward to our next webinars. And feel free to engage with us to keep on exchanging ideas in this space. Thank you. Feel free to leave at your own pleasure. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, this evening. Thank you. And thank you for our interpreters, the Arabic, the Portuguese, and the French. It's really nice. Each person getting this from their point of view and in a language they can easily interact with. Thank you so much for creating time and for the strain to translate throughout the 2 hours. I know it's not easy, and we are truly grateful for this.